Coming up next on Access Framingham TV, Cuba, with my guest Dave Hornfischer. Stay tuned. Hello, I'm Jack Barron, host of Travels with Jack on Access Framingham TV, where guests share with our audience a recent trip, a vacation, a cruise, or maybe a day trip right here in New England. You'll see their photos and hear about the exciting places they have visited. On this month's show, I'm very pleased to welcome Framingham resident and Access Framingham board member Dave Hornfischer. Dave loves baseball. Dave plays on a senior softball team, and together with his teammates had the chance to visit Cuba. What parts of the world have you visited? Please be my guest on Travels with Jack and share your travel experience with our viewing audience. Just contact us here at Access Framingham Television and let us know you'd like to be a guest. You can phone AFTV at 508-875-5434, or you can send an email message to info@accessfram.tv. Our associate producer will contact you to make arrangements for you to be on our show here on Access Framingham TV. If you don't live in Massachusetts, we would be pleased to assist with your travel to the Access Framingham studios. And now, let me welcome Dave to Travels with Jack. Welcome.
Hi, Jack. Great to be here.
Thank you. Let me just go over a little bit of a history. Dave Hornfischer is a current resident of Framingham with his wife, Elsa. They've lived here 30 plus years. They have been very actively involved with the board of AFTV. They have two grown children, Jim, who resides in Texas, and Amy, who lives here in Framingham. And they have 7 wonderful grandchildren, each one better than the other. Dave was Chief Financial Officer for 25 years at the Berklee College of Music, and he is currently retired, but a very active retired. One of Dave's extra activities is he is a senior softball player for the Wayland-based Eastern Mass Senior Softball League. That's a lot for me to spit out. The softball league is what led Dave to Cuba, which he's going to share with us tonight. Dave was also a host for several years at the comedy open mic show at Amazing Things here in Framingham. And this one I love, he was also a board member and very active in the Bo Sox Club, which is the official Red Sox fan club. So this guy is everything softball, baseball.
That's what people say.
That's what they say. So welcome. If you would, tell us a little bit about your trip to Cuba, how it came about, the people who put it together, how you got there.
Sure.
I'm ready to listen, and then as the photos come up, interrupt me if I'm talking, because I talk a lot, and just say, Jack, that's whatever it is.
Okay, well, about 4 years ago, after not having played baseball for 40 years, I discovered the Eastern Mass Senior Softball League, which is, as you mentioned, is based in Wayland, and their guys ages 55 to 85 play softball 2 or 3 times a week. And at the point, I was middle-aged, if you do the math on that one, and joined the league. And it so happened that one of the players in the league, Mike Eisenberg, runs a travel agency out of Wellesley that has been very involved in travel to Cuba. And over the last 7 years, guys from the EMAS have been going to Cuba, and then 3 years ago, players from Cuba started to come to the U.S. And Elsa and I hosted 2 or 3 of them 3 times at our house while they were here playing, and we had games on the Boston Common.
These were also seniors?
These were seniors from Cuba, some of whom were ex-Cuban major leaguers, if you will.
Oh,
and
okay.
Had they not been stuck in Cuba, several of them would have been at Fenway Park. There's no in their younger days. And I'll talk a little bit about a couple of them in the pictures. But last year, finally, I decided it was time for me to visit Cuba. And so I was part of a group of about 20 of us that traveled to Cuba in December of 2015. And we flew to Havana and had a number of softball adventures there. Saw a little bit of Havana, and we'll be looking at some of the photos from that
Terrific.
tonight. So.
You got there, you left Boston, you went to Miami?
We flew to Miami, spent a night in Miami.
And then they flew you over to Cuba?
And then had a charter flight to Cuba.
And took you about an hour?
Yeah, about that.
Okay, and you had mentioned to me in Cuba they took a little while to get your luggage.
It seemed forever. We were
What
in
was
the
the
Cuba
term
airport.
you called me? Well, Cuba time? What was it?
Yeah, well, the travel guide said that when unusual things happen in Cuba, we just say TIC, this is Cuba.
This is Cuba, okay. So got to the airport, got settled with your luggage, and they sent you, did a bus take you over?
We had a bus that took us everywhere.
To the and you stayed initially at the Saratoga Hotel.
We stayed at the Saratoga, which was one of the nicer hotels I've traveled. I've been in Europe, and this was definitely a 5-star hotel. And
today, I think you mentioned to me, you think it's part of the Marriott chain.
Yeah, Marriott in there has now taken it over and will eventually, I guess, run it in some ways. But
yeah. Now, this is a map of Cuba, so if you want to just show the folks.
Unfortunately, our entire trip was in Havana, so up in the northwest corner. I was surprised to know that Cuba is about 170 miles long, and there's 11 million people that live in Cuba, and that hasn't changed much over the last number of years.
Population has remained about the same.
Despite a lot of Cubans wanting to escape and come to the U.S. Now they don't even have to escape. They can just come to the U.S.
So Havana would be, okay, we got it in big letters. All right, this is what in Havana?
So there's the Cuban flag at that was at one of the museums that we went to. I think that was the Museum of the Revolution.
Oh, they have a Revolution Museum.
Yeah, I have some pictures of that. And this is the hat that I'm wearing. Although mine has 2015 in the middle, it reflects the year that we went, symbolizing the Cuban flag and the U.S. flag in partnership. And
the hats are made in China?
I don't think so. I have to look. And this is the logo of the EMAS Senior Softball League, which is always looking for senior players. We have 2 or 3 women that play in the league as well.
Oh, really?
And,
okay.
And it's both
they
competitive
admit to
and
their
fun.
age, or do they tell you we're too young to play, but we're going to go anyway?
I think the women can play after age 25, and this is the group that sponsors it, the Educational Travel Alliance out of Wellesley. Mike Eisenberg has been the guy that's run this, and he's been very involved with a lot of the major U.S. connections to Cuba, including the Pope's visit and the presidents and Major League Baseball's last year. While we were there,
really?
he was on the phone talking with people helping connect the Major League Baseball. But they're in Wellesley, and they've been doing this for a long time, and so. They're somebody. This is a picture. I mentioned that the Cubans came to the U.S. before I went there. This is us at Fenway Park one year with a group of us who were there, and we were honored by the Red Sox on the field.
Now, the women, are those the U.S. women, or are they Cuban women?
No, those are the spouses of a couple of the Cubans.
Oh, okay.
These are 3 of the guys that stayed with us at our house. The guy on the right is actually in the Softball Hall of Fame.
Really?
Armando, I forget what his last name is.
Okay. They look like
And
regular American
this
folks.
guy here is known as the Mickey Mantle of Cuba, Pedro Chavez. He's now in his 80s, and he didn't play, but if you look him up online, he has an incredible resume for back in the day when he was. He has a lot of home runs. He was a manager for a long time of the Cuban baseball team. Yeah, very.
Did you
very
get
great
any
guy.
sense from them that they felt cheated, that they couldn't make the big money and be in the States?
Very much so.
Oh, they did bring that up.
Well, no, they didn't. One of the nights when we were at Fenway Park was standing there, and one of the guys is looking very wistful. And I said, you could have played here, couldn't you? And he looked at me and he nodded and just very quietly said, yeah, I could have. And anyway, that's the guy. That's my wife Elsa, and that's me in the middle with the Cuba hat on. And the guy on the right is was a shortstop on the All-Star, and he was All-Star in the Cuban World Series. And Roberto Clemente supposedly, when they were in San Juan for a tournament, offered him a chance to come to the U.S. to play, and he couldn't leave at the time, and just couldn't leave his family. The guy on the left was a left-handed pitcher who's been in the Cuban government for the last 40 years.
Oh, really?
His nickname is Big Poopy. Big,
not Pappy.
Not Pappy.
Okay.
This is them at Fenway Park. The Red Sox honored us and had the Cuban players, some of their pictures up on the.
What
on the
I had always
Jumbotron.
heard with Cuban players is that they could come here and play, but they had to send a lot of their money to the government if they wanted that deal.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that was, but yeah. So that's just a kind of a map of the island, just to give some perspective. But this is the charter airline that we landed on. We landed in the rain. It seemed like it rained almost every day we were there this year. Usually
December can be a little bit.
The guys had been before. They said they'd never been rained out, but we were playing in mud. And
really? Yeah, no.
And it was kind of it kind of messed up the softball.
Yep, December in the Caribbean in that area can be
and there's
a little bit wet.
The Marte Airport, and the airport was, and this is the Saratoga Hotel.
Nice.
It was a very elegant hotel. They had guards at the door that wouldn't let most of the locals in. It was
so much for communism, huh?
Well, yeah. This is where the intelligentsia stay, I think. I think the room rate was something like $400 a night. This is some of the artwork in the lobby.
Now, was this an older hotel, or?
Yeah, I think so. But it certainly had been upgraded. It had been upgraded. Okay. It was certainly a very comfortable place. They had bottled water for us to drink. We were advised not to drink the water, and my son and I both.
They did tell you.
Both had probably some lettuce or something we shouldn't have eaten, and
really?
We both missed the trip to the Hemingway house. And that's my son, Jim, who lives in Austin, Texas.
Well, you're very tall, so he's taller than you.
He's taller than me, and he played third and I played first, so we had some Hornfischer to Hornfischer plays, which will be a lifelong memory. Definitely something off the bucket list. We were celebrating his 50th birthday, so he officially qualified for senior softball.
Oh, he could have been a ringer.
This was the opening event there of the softball tournament was actually quite nice. The first year that they did this 7 years ago was really a real breakthrough, and Mike and the people from his firm did a great job in really knocking down a lot of the barriers between the governments at the time to make this happen. But the day we were there, we had this group that played the national anthem. They even played the Stars and Stripes Forever in addition to playing the Cuban national anthem.
Has Mike discussed with you, well, it may be too soon, we're doing this show right after the election with President-elect Trump.
No.
Did he discuss with you at all changes?
No. In fact, they're there right now. These are some of the young Cuban ball players that were there to watch the game with us, and quickly wanting our batting gloves and anything else they could get from us, candies and stuff like that. There's a picture of us lining up for the national anthem with our flags and the two teams, and that was probably the highlight of the whole trip. Was standing on the ball field and hearing them play the Cuban national anthem, then hearing them play the U.S. national anthem, and with our hats off, and it was a real proud moment and a real sense of brotherhood with these guys. Who were all basically our age, and it was there's the conventional handshake. And this was one of the parties that we had together with the guys. Oh, they set up
parties for you too?
Oh yeah, no. We had some great times together. I mean, 3 or 4 of these guys had been to my house, and been to so it was great to see them in their homeland. And really, it really made a great connection. I mean, it's one thing to go someplace and just be a tourist, but to go when you're basically with your Cuban brothers and the guys who've come to your house and have met your wife and your family and the same thing.
So it was like a little bit of a reunion for you.
Absolutely. Yep. That was the bus that this was the government provided bus, and we had a few times in which we needed some strength to get the show on the road, but it all. Oh, thank you. Oh, this is an interesting group. Baseball is very big in Cuba, and the Castro government is not big in letting groups get together to talk.
Really?
Because they're afraid they could be revolutionaries against conspiring against the government. Well, every day in the main square in Cuba, this group of people get together, and would you care to guess what they might be allowed to talk about?
Baseball.
Bingo! Yes, that's the baseball group, and they get together every day from something like 3 to 5, and
so even today, they told you they're restricted from what they can do and say.
this was a year ago. It may be better now, but
A year ago, they were still restricted.
somewhat.
This is what?
This is what they call their Olympic Stadium.
Okay.
I have here a badge that was given to us by one of the Cuban Olympians. In fact, a couple of the Cuban Olympians were there to welcome us at the day we had the opening ceremony. Louis Tiant's brother was actually even there.
Oh, all right.
The Red Sox pitcher. This is the inside of its stadium. They were interestingly enough lining up for a boxing match between an American and a Cuban, and they had the American flag and the Cuban flag displayed.
Did you get
in
the
there.
feeling, they always portray the Cuba hates America, resents us for the different restrictions on trade and everything. What sense did you get from the people you were with and their feeling toward Americans?
Yeah, in some ways it resembled a trip that we had to Greece a number of years ago when we were talking with somebody in the restaurant. They said, we hate your government and we love your people.
Oh, really?
And that was a constant theme. Even in the museum, I think I have a picture of some caricatures of Bush and Reagan, and that they aren't exactly popular in Cuba, but I think they really missed the connections with the American people, and that's why I think this softball thing was really so good.
Yeah. So in other words, you don't see the animosity on the street toward America.
Oh, absolutely not. No, not at all. The absolute opposite. This is just a scene of a couple of pictures coming up here of some of the kids in Cuba playing ball. This was a girls'
It looks like a nice field.
This was a girls' softball field, and kind of stuck in the middle of a slum. The stands were kind of well beat up, but the field was in decent shape.
Yeah,
and,
it looks like it is.
And there's another picture coming up of one of the. This girl here was really good. She could play for any American. I think she's probably about 16. She was the daughter of one of our one of the players.
Really? One of the players.
And she was impressive in the game. We had a party. I showed a picture of Big Poopy there, the guy who had been in the government. Well, he is very connected. Whenever he would show up, we would get some special benefit. When he'd show it, he had a little Russian car there, and when he'd show up, it would usually be filled with beer in the back. And he got us into this fancy nightclub, and there's a couple of pictures of that later. But he had this outdoor.
You mean to say the elites in the government got special treatment?
Absolutely.
Oh my
God. No doubt about it.
I find that hard to believe.
Yeah, it is kind of hard. Well, just like here, but anyway.
But this was supposed to be the
we had a
equal for all. All right, I won't get into it.
We had a wonderful event one afternoon at this country place. It's like it was a park with a big pavilion, and this is driving out to it, which was a kind of a pretty ride. And one of the players on our team was, in fact, he stayed at our house. Is in the pig business, the pork business.
Okay.
And we had two of these luscious looking roast pork sitting out there, and their families are all there. Probably about 150 of us or so there for the event. This is a sample of a Cuban meal with some of the vegetables that we ate.
So what am I looking at?
I don't know.
Rice. I recognize the rice.
Yeah, there's it's
maybe plantain.
Yeah, it could be. We ate it all, and the next day, my son and I both were sick. We're sick.
The food in general.
These are two of the beers. There seemed to be there was a choice in beer between Bucanero and Cristal, And we liked the Bucanero a little better. It was a little darker, but any place you went, that you go to Colorado, the question is red or green. Well, this was red or green in Cuba.
Oh, I see. You want red or green? What did you find in general with the food?
The food was on the bland side. It was good. I mean, there was nothing. We ate at tourist restaurants, though, so we weren't. I mean, we wouldn't dare eat in a local place because of the water issue. And so we were warned not to really eat street food or food,
They continually warned you
but
with that.
we were at sort of tourist restaurants, and we ate at every night. And it was sort of, the menu was pretty much the same every night, and it was good. Nothing mattered with it.
Nothing exciting,
it was
though.
Yeah, I mean, but because the Cuban people don't seem to like spices. When the guys came here and we'd suggest, would you like to go to a Brazilian restaurant because it's spicy? No, we'd prefer not. They
Really, they used to.
And they love steak when they're here. That's all they wanted to eat because they don't get a lot of red meat in Cuba.
This is the capital.
Well, this is a tourist postcard with some of the highlights, some of the major buildings. We'll see some of them in some of the later slides. But our hotel was right across the street from what is the Capitol.
Yep.
And the Capitol has been under constant renovation for, 10 or 15 years. Nothing, in many ways, it's a lot like the Capitol of the U.S. because nothing happens inside of it.
Okay.
This was a theater building, which was right down the street again from our hotel, which was right in the center.
So your hotel sounds like it was very well located.
Oh, very much. There was a big park to the left of it. This is the hotel at night, which was just spectacular.
Oh, it looks nice.
But again, the inside is a complete wasteland, and it's not usable at the present time. That's all show on the outside. This was the Capri Hotel, which was another of the one of the larger hotels that has been there for a while.
How did this look inside? Did you get a chance?
Pretty much the same. One of the hotels, I'm not sure it was this one or not, had a lot of American memorabilia from the 50s. Statues of Frank Sinatra, pictures of Marilyn Monroe, Joe DiMaggio. I found a lovely, wonderful picture of Ted Williams with Castro.
Oh, really?
The previous picture was one of a renovation. This is sort of a general sky view of the city, and you can see a lot of buildings here that really look like they need some maintenance.
You did sense that.
If there was one thing that I would love to have going forward, it would be the paint franchise, because this was one of the museums with a sort of symbolizing the revolution. The concept of the revolution was everywhere. The fact that we're still fighting to be an independent communist country, I guess. This is right along what they call the
Not
Mali.
too much traffic.
No, that was wonderful. This was like being in America in the 50s. In many ways, the cars looked the same. The traffic on the road, the roads we were on were all very decent. This is along what they call the Malecon, which is along the beach. We're along the waterfront, and a lot of kind of Soviet-style buildings, hotels that are.
The Russians you were told, built a lot of stuff.
The situation in Cuba changed a lot in 1989 when the wall came down, because all of a sudden the Soviet Union didn't have funds to provide. And they had to call that the special period because the lack of food and resources really fell apart in about 1989 to 92. This was an old historic fort right on the point of the water.
I've seen that picture many times. I think in James Bond movies, I think.
Possibly.
Really? Yeah.
I don't know. This is the Revolution Square. And the pictures on the three people on the faces on the wall.
Manny, Mo, and Jack? Or?
No, Curly, Mo, and Larry. No, there's Castro, Che Guevara, and I'm not sure who the third one is to be. I don't know, but it's a lovely square there. Che Guevara, who seemed to be almost as popular as Castro in terms of pictures. His image seemed to be everywhere. This was a museum to Marte, who is beloved. He was the guy who was really responsible for Cuba's freedom in the 1890s to 1900, from when they fought to escape from Spain, only to become sort of a vessel of the U.S. in around 1900.
Well, they came apart from Spain in the Spanish-American War.
Right, and then there's a close-up of Marte, who was Martí.
Along with the Philippines.
Yeah.
Came also.
That's traffic directions.
That actually looks a little bit low. This is the Capitol.
This is just the top of one of the buildings.
And
The sculptures.
what is the statue? What is the sculpture?
I don't know.
I noticed it on
I think
your...
it's winged.
I don't know if we can get a picture of the Havana Club rum that Dave brought us, but...
we have two kinds of rum, actually. We have
rum.
Havana.
Havana.
You want to zoom in on that, and Santiago.
Santiago. But I noticed on the Havana Club, it has that same statue. You can almost see it. That's on the top of the Capitol. So I'll have to research the statue. But and the rum you said was pretty good.
The rum is very good. That was our drink of choice while we were there.
But no Coca-Cola.
Cola, but
they just had cola, but not
Cuba
Coca.
Libre has some of this and some cola and a little lime juice.
But I know I had asked you. You said there were not a lot of brand names.
Well, the one thing that was very noticeable as you drive around is no advertising anywhere. The only billboards that you would see would be, and I think I have a couple of them, slides of that, are promoting the revolution. And but the absence of advertising and the absence of fast food, that's all going to change. Now I already mentioned the hotel being part of Marriott. It's only minutes before McDonald's.
The reason they don't have advertisers is they don't have money to spend.
Well, that's right, because
once they have money, then the advertisers come in. But I thought that was interesting. They didn't have brand name like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. I can't imagine. There's that statue. I'm going to have to figure out, okay, this is another monument. This is what?
I wish I knew.
Okay. No, it looks
it's
like
facing
Italy.
Out, again, facing out. The statues were impressive in many places.
That looks almost like in Rome.
This is a statue to the Maine. And my son, being a historian, was certainly very interested in that. This was the USS Maine that freed Cuba, helped in the Spanish-American War, and there was a lovely memorial to them with. There's another slide coming up after that.
Any mention of Batista or anything when you were in the museums? Or?
Oh, nothing very positive. No, he was.
Well, even negative.
Oh, absolutely. Very, very much so. He was he was the one that made the revolution possible, I think.
Well, I think it had been brewing anyway.
The brutality under which the people were living certainly justified a lot of the revolution. You can see this is again a part of the main statue with the names of some of the people who were died on the plaque on the bottom. Religion isn't completely eliminated, even though it was communist.
Statue.
It was a huge statue of Jesus overlooking the harbor, which is where we took this. And several of the old churches that went back to the 1700s. There's a picture coming up of the cathedral. That was in the
statue of Jesus reminds me a little bit in Rio de Janeiro. Way
up
on the top,
yes, right.
You have Christ the Redeemer. It was fabulous.
Right. Yeah, and that's
this looks beautiful.
That's the inside of the old cathedral, which was very
ornate.
Very, very beautiful. And this is right outside in the same square. They were doing an archaeological dig, which was pretty interesting because the island has certainly been there a long time. And as you got down into old Havana, there was a lot of buildings and artifacts there that went way back. That was quite interesting. Yeah.
From when the Spanish came, or before
then? Before then, even. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So they were what? Indians? It must have been of some kind.
I guess. Yeah. But music and arts were certainly something that I was particularly interested in finding out in our spare time. And this was an ad
your
for the
history
Buena Vista
with Berkeley,
Social Club. This was an ad in the lobby of the hotel. But we were on the streets. One thing that we didn't have enough time as much to get into really kind of street life nightclubs. And the next slide coming up is one night on the streets when we were out just kind of walking down from about 4 or 5 blocks down from the hotel, past a couple of the bars.
Safety. How do you feel safety-wise?
Oh, very safe.
You did?
Very safe. No crime there, because if you commit a crime, you're gone. We won't see Jack tomorrow if Jack does something.
They put you in jail or they send you to America?
Both. Well, yeah, that was said, that they sent a lot of the less desirables to America. But this was the inside of one of the clubs with a band playing and a woman singing. And it was just a fun scene on the street there, and a lot of little shops selling art.
Oh, the art. I've always heard the art was very nice.
This was a big market. that they had that had a combination of just kind of a lot of tourist trinkets. And if you want to shine on this, I'll hold this up to look at. This was for a buck or so. This was a kind of a a little license plate promoting the old cars. My wife and I had a '58 Ford when we were first married, and it was so much fun to see '58 Fords on the street again. I don't think this is an exact image of a '58 Ford, but it was as close as I could find.
So it was very nostalgic for you to see all the cars.
Oh, very nostalgic. I thought I was back in the
in the 50s.
I was 20 again. Yeah.
And this is what?
This is some of the artwork. The next several pictures are of artwork that I just took some random photos of that were in the museum, or in the marketplace, I guess I'd call it. Charlie Chaplin on the bottom there. A lot of interest in American culture, even though we're. You just, I don't care where you go in the world, you can't get away from American culture.
You had to meet a lot of people though who must have said, I have a cousin who lives in America, or I have a brother or sister who came there. I mean, did you find that? Yeah,
much more so of American culture from pre-50s. I mean, you didn't see a lot of pictures of Beyonce or current pop stars there. I think they knew Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle, maybe more so than they did.
But did you get a sense from a lot of the local people that they had family who lived in the United States?
Oh, very much so.
Very much so.
The guys, when they came to visit us, mostly all had family in Miami.
Yeah.
And they'd all want to use our cell phones to call Miami.
Call them up. Yeah, because I think you know what? I was at my doctor's office today, one of my doctors, and he had just been to Cuba. And he said to me, Jack, he says, they have a $60 billion economy. And he said, but about $3 to $4 billion a year of that economy is money sent from the United States to family in Cuba. Mm-hmm. So they are very...
Oh, they do.
They get a lot of their resources from the U.S., from family, whatever.
Right.
So, and I think I told you earlier, I had two great aunts who left Cuba in '58 and came to the States.
And you all would recognize this guy.
That looks like Frank Sinatra, yeah.
Who, again, and this was just a piece of street art. The graffiti on the street was very attractive in many places, this kind of being one. This was just, in addition to, people selling art on the streets, this was in a lower neighborhood. The next slide coming up is on sort of right down this very lovely boulevard down from our hotel that we walked down to the
Your photos are terrific. I know you commented you did them all with an iPhone, but
yes.
I got to tell you, they're clear as could be. They really are great.
Outside the cathedral, this woman was selling these little dolls. If you flip them up, the girl turns from a white girl to a girl with a black face.
Oh,
okay. and a different color skirt.
Something
she was lovely.
For everybody.
I said, well, if I buy one of your dolls, can I take a picture of you? And she said, she was very pleased to do that and gave me that very sweet smile. This was one of the highlights of the trip. Was a vocal group that we got to hear, an a cappella group. This group was called Vocal Luna, and they actually sang for the Pope when the Pope was there.
Oh, really?
And I think we have a little bit of their music coming up. I think there was about 12 of them, I think, and they were in 30. Many of them were music teachers.
This must have been arranged for you by the travel agent.
Yes. Yeah, there were two things that were arranged. One, the music group, and then we had a chance to meet and talk with a dance group. And these, okay, here we go with them. Very good
Okay.
English, right? Yeah, that's Vocal Luna. They were very interested in my background at Berklee College of Music.
I would think so,
They all
sure.
knew certainly a lot about Berklee. And,
Oh, really? They did?
Yeah, and I made an effort to try and see if there was some way that we could get them to make a connection in Boston, but that so far hasn't been able to happen. But they were terrific. This is the dance group that actually had us up doing dance steps and doing modern dance and jumping around, and they put on a display. This was a group at one of the restaurants that almost all the restaurants we went to, they had little trios.
Oh, really? They did?
Doing pop, old jazz standards, and as well as kind of Cuban music.
Interesting.
These are a couple of my wife loves local crafts, and this is a set of 3 little musicians that we proudly have in our living
You
room
really
now.
did find, though, at a lot of the restaurants they had music for you.
Yeah, and speaking of music,
yep.
one of the highlights was a visit to the Tropicana Club, which was a club that existed back in the pre-revolutionary days that I believe they've kept for
tourism.
For the tourists and those who are connected. I mean, the tickets to this were like over $100.
They were.
And they were again provided by our friend Big Poopy, who got us seats right in the front row. And this
Your
was
government friend.
my government friend, and this was as good as anything that you'd see in Las Vegas.
I think, if I'm not,
the
isn't
music
this
and
the show?
I love this dancer here with
Isn't
the
this
lamp.
in The Godfather? One of the Godfather
It probably
two or something?
could be, because
I
this
think
was
so.
this was quite the night. I'll tell you, we were right in the front section. It was a great chance to stand there taking pictures. Okay, now we're going to get to the cigar factory. That building in the back there is the cigar factory. Cigars are about 5 or 6% of the economy. This one factory produces about 30,000 cigars a year. Per day, I'm sorry. And they have,
Oh, really?
they have 300 rollers, as they call them. And so each one is making about 10 cigars, I guess, a day. And we got to have a puff on one while we were in the cigar, and while we were in there. I have a box here of cigars. This was the guy from Venezuela. Now, one of the interesting things that we had is that the guy on the left is a ball player who's come here, and Jorge Rodriguez, and he and his brother did a terrific presentation of the history of Cuba and the relations with the U.S. for us, and it was about a 2-hour presentation in which they went through everything from back in 1900 all the way through the Soviet period, the special period they call it, right up to today, talking about some of the issues that are really problematical for the Cubans right now. The biggest issue, two big issues, I'd say. One were the fact that Cubans weren't. They have a great education system. They have 100,000 doctors in Cuba. They have great doctor training, but all the doctors are leaving to go to other countries in Latin America, and now that it's easy for them people to leave, so this has become a big issue.
They're leaving for more money.
Yes, of course, yeah, and the other issue being lack of internet. The internet is something like $2 a minute, and to a
expensive.
and to a person who's making $7 a day, that doesn't compute very well.
What about well, go ahead. I'll let you talk about this. I don't want to ask you about television, what you saw on TV.
2 government channels.
Oh, that's it?
I mean, we were in the hotel and we had cable.
Oh, you did?
But most places wouldn't
meaning
have
what?
cable.
You got like CNN and...
There was CNN was there.
You
And,
did
and
get,
BBC,
so you got a
and
lot
we
of
had
international stuff.
Yeah,
Oh.
But there was one government channel for the most part that was
the regular people.
regular people. And if some of the pictures I have, you'll see TV antennas on top of the houses. But television's not much. There's a reason people sit on the streets at night and talk with each other. Which, this is some of the revolution art. The next section's coming up are some pictures of the revolution things. This was the Museum of the Revolution. That's my son Jim, where we spent a couple of hours, and this was fascinating.
Did you get any sense that anyone said to you, this revolution didn't turn out the way we wanted, or they don't say that?
They do, but they say it in funny ways. The travel guide, for example, almost every day he had a Castro joke for us.
Okay.
This was Castro's ship, the grandma that he took from, I believe it was Mexico, to when they did the revolution. back in the 50s, and when they officially came there. These were a couple of missiles that were in the backyard of the museum that I think presumably were American that were shot down. And then that's Castro, the ball player. Castro loves baseball. And you can see my image in the picture, taking the picture. I thought that was great of me playing baseball with Castro, sort of.
Okay.
But Castro is a big lover of baseball and a ball player himself, I guess. And these are some of the newspaper, the Grama is
that's the national newspaper.
That's the national newspaper and still is. And these were some of the headlines of the time during the Revolution that were preserved in the museum.
So you say they have a Castro joke every day, and you think that's kind of how they...
Yeah, one of them is somebody says to Castro, said, you know, in America there are people that go to bed hungry every night. And Castro says, well, that never happens in Cuba. And the guy says, well, how? And the guy says, but I'm hungry now. And Castro says, well, don't go to sleep. This was in the museum. This was one of the caricatures of Reagan and Bush, and and Bautista was on the left. The Rincon de los Criminals or something of the Cretans, I guess. Circle of Cretans, I think it was. This is one of the posters that you'd see on a billboard that I saw on the street. United in the construction of socialism, I think that says. And the women's rights are fairly progressive in Cuba. Cuba has 17 provinces, and I think more than half of them have women who are the governors at the present time. That was one of the things, that and their education system are two things that they were most proud of politically, I would say. This is an image of another picture of the skyscape of Havana, and again, kind of a mix of buildings. Some of the neighborhoods, the housing in some of the neighborhoods was very nice Spanish type housing, as nice as you might see in Miami. Not a lot of that, but most of the buildings, as you'll see in the next bunch of slides coming up here, were really very run down. This is a factory, a lot of pollution.
Really?
I don't think they have any idea what pollution control is.
You really did see a lot of...
It was black smoke spewing everywhere from...
From what kind of production? Electricity or...
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Because they might do aluminum, but
the waterfront is really in need of a lot of maintenance in order to even bring cruise ships into there.
Really?
In many places. And a lot of stray dogs. On the street,
really? Okay.
And a lot of streets in need of repair. The highways were in pretty good shape, but there's some of the television antennas on a rooftop scene. I think this was.
Yeah, the rooftop doesn't look too good.
Yeah. And this was, you saw a lot of very dilapidated buildings and people out picking through trash.
It looks dilapidated.
People there are a lot of people are hurting. As I mentioned, though, the streetscape at night was kind of interesting. Driving down a street, we came back at night one night on the bus, and you saw people outside talking to each other. And I think, in a simpler time, it kind of reminded me of the 50s again, because we didn't sit in our house and watch television all night. I mean, you drive down an American street now, and all you see are televisions and windows. People were actually out on the street, sitting on street steps, on the doorstep, talking to one another and playing stickball in the street.
With only 2 TV stations and they're both government propaganda, you're better off outside.
I think so, yeah. In many parts of the city, it looked like a bomb. It looked like it was war-torn.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm a little surprised, Dave. These look much more... devastating than I anticipated.
And you would see these, and the 2 or 3 buildings on the left would be very well taken care of, and you'd say, what happened here? That's another kind of a lot of these little 3-wheeler taxis running around were kind of a cute vehicle that
like in Thailand, they have those. Yeah.
And this was this
looks very nice.
This was an old hotel, but again, the stairway was very beat up. Kind of reminded me of the steps to the Philadelphia Museum of Art about 30 years ago, which have now been restored very nicely.
Right.
But
where Rocky climbs.
But this was people waiting for a bus. Bus transportation was certainly very popular. I didn't see any train
Big buses or little buses?
Big buses. Yeah, big buses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you really got some great photos. I got to compliment you.
Oh, thank you. This again was right near the hotel. A lot of begging on the street.
Did Elsa go with you on this?
No, she didn't. No.
What'd she think when you showed her some of the photos?
Well, she was interested. Yeah. She said she can't wait to see my show here.
Okay.
That was. I think we're about to get into some of the car pictures. That was a.
No, the buildings really do look beaten up.
The paint franchise is the stucco repair business is going to. This was a museum where the ivy is, the trees are literally growing into the walls.
Were your fellow softball players a little bit surprised at how degraded the infrastructure had become?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of was there in your face. It wasn't,
but did they comment? Did they say, gee, I didn't expect it to look this way? Or did they say, this is just what I thought it would be?
Well, yeah, pretty much. And,
really?
and it was mixed. I mean, but one day, you'd see some of these beautiful buildings, and then other times it would be very run down, kind of right next to each other, and it was kind of surprising.
It surprises me because I don't, I've seen pictures of Cuba, but I always see the pictures of, the grand museums, the hotels,
right,
and this is actually quite interesting that you bring this to our attention.
Yeah. Well, there is a lot of work to do, but this section now is getting into all the old cars, which were just are just so fun to see. Cars from the 40s and 50s. I think they went up to about 50s.
They're prohibiting them from exporting.
Yes, they are.
Yep.
And they've been largely fixed up with Russian truck parts, I was told.
Really?
Yeah. That they were able to creatively cannibalize them.
They're famous for that.
You would see some that were kind of in ill repair like this, and then others coming up were just absolutely spectacular. They look like
I saw a TV show, maybe PBS or something. They were famous for their mechanics to keep these cars running.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, that looks nice.
Oh yeah, wait till you see some of the other ones coming up there. They were just gorgeous. This was just six guys.
Good shape.
Six guys out zipping around, I think. A lot of taxis offering you a ride and other benefits maybe if you took a taxi ride.
Oh, okay.
This was a taxi driver outside the Museum of the Revolution looking for tourists.
What currency did they use there?
That's an interesting story. They have two currencies. They have kooks, which are the tourist currency, and then they have the Cuban peso, and it's like 20 to 1, and the locals get paid in Cuban pesos.
Yeah.
Which are sort of worthless because it's like 20 to 1. They're worth like a nickel, okay, and maybe you're lucky if you make 100 a day, okay, which is like $5. And so anytime they can get kooks from a tourist in terms of selling something black market, even the Cuban cigar workers leave with several cigars so that they can sell.
Oh.
Sell on the black. The black market. The black market is real big, as you might expect when people.
Something I didn't give it any thought.
Yeah.
They have, but you felt there was an active black market.
Oh, in everything.
In everything.
You could, if you wanted it, you could get it.
So in other words, part of their deal rolling cigars was the bosses knew
that they walked out with a half a dozen every night or something.
And sold them on the street.
We bought a box of cigars that when the Cubans came here, they brought me a real box of Cuban cigars. And if you look at this, I'd like to show this. These are Cohibas, which are the most famous brand.
Oh,
and they all had this seal on them, which sealed the box. And this indicated it was a legitimate box. Well, we were sort of talked into going into this back room with this guy, and I got you a deal, and he shows us the box. It's got the seal on it and all that, and he rolled out one of them and showed us how perfectly it was made, and then yet we came to realize later that they probably weren't the finest, but we did bring home.
Look at that!
I'm not a smoker. I only smoke a cigar back when the Berkeley trustees would pass the budget, or when a Boston sports team would win a championship. And these are actually probably all kind of hardened and spoiled at this point.
But that's the fancy brand, Cohiba.
Cohiba is one of the two or three. There's another one. This one here, Monte Cristos are very good too.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Part of the show and
But
tell.
that's all right. But that's a big side business. Is they barter and sell out a little bit of what they work with.
Right. This is the taxi lineup right near the hotel. And there'd be about 20 of these cars there with guys all trying to convince you to go for a ride, meet their sister, something like that.
No, they look great. The cars.
Yeah, the cars were. These were just look at that yellow.
Big attraction.
That is a big attraction. But this isn't atypical. These were some of the nicest bunch you'd see together. And as you saw in some of the other pictures, some were a little on the run downside, but for the most part, it was just fun to sit at the hotel and watch the traffic go through the main square with all these cars. I'd say about 1 out of every 3 cars that went by was one of these. Now we were in the center of Havana, of the action. So that may have been atypical, but I mean, this old Chevy from the 50s was certainly one that we all recognize from our younger days. There's my 58 Ford that I just had to take a picture of, or something in that vicinity, very close. My wife and I had a green one of those that we should have kept. Big mistakes. This was a wedding. This was a bride. We caught a wedding and right on the square.
They probably rent.
I'm sure that's like the U.S.
That looks like a Dodge or something.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, those are terrific.
And I love these little 3-wheeler. We didn't get a ride in a pedal run. That was a run by a guy pedaling away.
Oh, really? No gasoline?
Motor.
No,
this was like this was a rickshaw on a rainy day, I guess. Excuse me. And this was a cuter one, a different style.
That looks almost like the Red Sox used years ago. Yeah. Remember they had
the bullpen pitcher.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think now they all have to walk.
Well, those were back in the 50s when they did that. So
you remember? It was shaped like a baseball?
Yeah, I sure do. Yep. Yeah. And I love this picture because it's got a bus, which is you asked about the Cuban buses. It's got one of those little 3-wheelers. It's got the 58 Ford-like thing, or 56 or whatever, and it's got a regular taxi on the left. So you kind of see all the various forms of transportation there in that one picture.
That does. It looks like a Ford Fairlane.
Yes, I think so. Ford Fairlane, yeah.
The resemblance to the 58 Thunderbird. It's a very similar style.
Yeah, that's a classy car that any of us would be really proud to drive down Route 9.
Oh, no, it looks great. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Do we have any more photos?
I think we're getting pretty close to the end here. We're wrapping up the cars at the end.
Oh, there we go.
One of the highlights of the trip was that the U.S. ambassador actually played softball with us in our game.
You're kidding!
He wasn't great, but I think he got 1 hit, and I got 3, and that was one of the proudest things that I did. Was one of my bucket list goals.
So you had much success there.
Not a lot. No. We had a guy from New Jersey who was we had a couple of ringers who were really good hitters, but one of my goals was to get a hit in a communist country. Okay, so I did, and but we went to the embassy of the U.S. and we had a little presentation from the ambassador who went through some of what they were trying to do.
Isn't that nice that they met with you?
It was it was very interesting talking about the reparations and the deal that they're trying to make, the Gitmo, and trying to settle that whole thing, and trying to paying back the Americans who were in South Florida right now who had property taken from them, and how they
really?
valued it.
Are they considering doing that, or?
Well, that's part of this whole bridging to ending the embargo is to really deal with that.
I think one of the major issues that I remember them talking about with the embargo is I think there's quite a few wanted criminals.
Oh, I'm sure.
Wanted in the U.S. No, I mean murderers who have gone to Cuba, escaped justice, and I believe one of the big issues is bringing them back, and of course the financial reparations. But the big corporations would end up writing that off. I'm sure they've written it off anyway.
Right.
But if you said to Coca-Cola, you've got a claim in for $10 million. Are you willing to forego it if you can come in and sell Coke?
Sure.
They'd say sure. So I think a lot of that could probably be settled relatively easy.
Well, Bacardi rum is certainly a big player in that because they've got these other 2 brands now that have the monopoly.
And Bacardi went to Puerto Rico, but they're doing all right.
Yeah, they're doing all right too.
Yeah, and a few of the big Cuban cigar makers, I think, went to the Dominican Republic, maybe.
Probably. Yeah.
So, whether they'd go back, who knows.
Right.
But
If you are interested in going to Cuba, this is a great way to coordinate this through they're out of Wellesley on they're on the
maybe
website.
I'll go. Mrs. Barron won't go with me. I'll go on a single
arranged
trip.
There was a group of women who were part of another trip that we didn't quite have 25 people on our group.
And that's what
so
they
filled
wanted?
out our group, yeah.
Okay. And around, here we are. This is
That's
back
the
in your
leadership.
hotel?
No, that's in the hotel in the Saratoga. That's Mike on the right, and that's our tour guide, Giovanni in the middle, and that's Kathy Rice, Mike's assistant on the left, the assistant director of his firm. So yeah, they were great, and the tour guide was just terrific.
Now, he happened to go with you because he's a member of the team.
No, he's a government employee from Cuba.
No, I'm talking about Mike from Wellesley.
Oh no, Mike. Yes, Mike. Yeah, Mike's a ball player.
So you probably got an extra special trip because he must have a lot of connections.
Seventh year of doing this, and so he's been to Cuba 7 times, and he's been to Cuba probably 200-300 times.
Oh, really, that much?
But 7 times with the Eastern Mass softball players. So.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, I got to tell you something. I appreciate you so sharing this with us. It was really quite a good presentation because you had pictures we normally don't see. When they show Americans pictures of Cuba, it's always the beach and the oceans and the music playing, and you showed a little bit of a different side.
It was all of the above. I mean, the conflict between what's that image and the reality of ordinary life was striking. The graciousness and the kindness and the sweetness of the Cuban players was, and you discover that wherever you go in the world. For the most part,
you're absolutely right.
People are people at the end of the day, and but being there with playing ball with these Cuban legends, and these guys really were legends in their time.
Was very exciting.
I mean, it would be almost like getting the chance to play baseball against Ted Williams or something.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure and just a thrill, and maybe you'll come back and share another one of your trips with us.
It was great to be with the Rick Steves of Framingham. Well, thank you, Jack.
Thank you
been a
again,
pleasure.
Dave. We're going to bring you back. I'm going to get a hold of Bill and have him beat you up and say, all right, you're going back on Travels with Jack.
Okay, well, you got a deal.
Thanks.
It was great to be here.
Thank you.